Welcome to your Daily Dose of Sunday School, episode 70. We reach chapter 3 of Greg Koukl's Tactics, called Getting in the Driver's Seat, the Colombo Tactic. Now let's imagine that you're at school, you're reading the Bible on your phone or in normal book form, and somebody sees it, and they kind of ambush you with this question or this statement, not a question, with this statement. Some people take the Bible too seriously. It's just man-made. People make mistakes. So then you're sitting there, and this person, they might have been watching you for a couple minutes, thought about what they were going to blurt out, and you're stuck there with like 10 seconds to respond. What do you do? What do you say? Is 10 seconds long enough to think about all our Daily Dose of Sunday School videos about the Bible? It wouldn't be enough for me. And so Koukl suggests you ask a question like, is there a reason you think the Bible is less truthful than other books you own? Do people always make mistakes in what they write? Why don't you think God could use humans to write down exactly what he wanted? And so your 10-second window now has become much bigger, and you've started a discussion in a friendly way. So what are the advantages of the Colombo method? It takes the pressure off you. So, as I said, you've got time to think. It keeps you from jumping to conclusions. Sometimes somebody makes a statement and we want to start arguing with them without really knowing exactly what they were trying to say. And we end up spinning our wheels and talking past each other. This keeps that from happening. It also is an invitation to thoughtful dialogue. Okay, you wanted to ambush me with this statement. Well, do you want to slow down and talk about it? Questions are friendly and flattering. Okay, people love to be asked for advice. They love to be asked questions, and they'll be happy to talk about their opinions. Also, you might learn something. And I thought this was a really good point. You might learn something because he talks about a student asked him for a book on Buddhism because he had a Buddhist friend that he wanted to share the gospel with. And he said, forget the book. Okay, you don't have to go over this conversation and be an expert. Just invite them out for coffee and say, hey, could you explain to me what Buddhists believe? And you're in a spiritual conversation with this person that's very low pressure. You're really increasing the chance that they'll ask you about what you believe. And that's a much better way to do it. And it really reminds me of Voice of the Martyrs. They're always talking about like witnessing to your Muslim neighbors on their podcast. And always the emphasis is, hey, Muslims, unlike most Americans, Muslims love to talk about spiritual things. And don't be afraid just to talk to them, even if you don't know a whole lot. Share the love of Christ with them. And so I think it's a great idea. Just explain to me what you believe. This has to do with the fact that you're going to be able to be in the driver's seat of the conversation. You get to make progress in the conversation without being pushy. You can kind of direct the conversation. And it buys you time. Now you're not down to 10 seconds. You might have 10 minutes. You might have 30 minutes where you get to think about, okay, where do I want to come in on this conversation and say, well, the Bible says this. Or, I noticed something kind of contradictory in what you're saying. How do these two things go together? Or how can you really say this? So it really gives you a lot of more chances at entry because you're asking questions. And then he makes a statement, which I really had to think about it. He said that maybe you realize that this is the method Jesus used. And I thought about it. Thought about some of the examples he gave, and I was like, I don't know. Will this really be the same thing? He gave some examples when Jesus is talking to the Pharisees and or the religious leaders. And it seems like a lot of times he was trying to avoid their tricks is why he asked questions. But then more I thought about it, I thought, well, no, I think he kind of does. I think about, him asking Peter, who do the people say that I am? But who do you say that I am? So I think you could say, to an extent, yes, Jesus used this method. He was much wiser than us and much holier, much less, he wasn't confused by sin like we are. I think that affects our thinking. And so he was able to respond a lot better. But I do think he used it. So lastly, you might ask is, who is Colombo? Well, it's a detective show. Now, it's weird. This is a 10th anniversary of this book. I think probably when this book first came out, there were people who said, well, I think I remember the show Colombo. I don't know that anybody knows about it now, so he gives a little bit of description, but it's a detective show. I knew that much. I remember my grandma watching it, along with Murder, She Wrote. It's another detective show type thing. But yeah, he asked questions. And it's also the grandpa on Princess Bride. So there you go. That's some connection for you if you have no idea who Colombo is. Anyway, I think this is a really great method. Super good advice to be able to get in discussions with people.